welcome everybody also on my behalf. It's exciting times at SIG, but we're not going to speak about SIG. As Corinda said, we're going to speak about our SIG Benchmark Report. And the topics we will be covering today are actually threefold. After a brief introduction, we'll go over the global trends in software quality. So we're going to look at how the last year has shown itself in the various aspects of software quality. We'll specifically look at the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on software development, both production as well as quality, and then we'll dive into the important topic of technical debt, which is a subject that I guess you all will be very familiar with, but also want to learn more about. We'll conclude with some final thoughts, but before we go there, let me introduce you into the concepts that SIG uses to look at our business. We understand that software quality is seen from two sides. There's a side that looks at software and there's a side that looks inside software. It's of course very important to continuously look at software because that's where you will find the function if the thing actually does what you feel it needs to be doing. But it's also important that you understand how software actually works from within, because that's where the deep trouble can be buried. That's where the bulk of the iceberg might be, whereas looking at the software, looking at the functionality, you might only be seeing the tip of that iceberg. And we base all of this information on a lot of data, as Corinda said. Last year, when we did the symposium, we were using 36 billion lines of code of over 280 technologies, of over 5,000 systems. Now, we have not been standing still in the last year, because now we're looking forward, we are using 48 billion lines of code, and every week there's more than 235 million coming there. So we'll be closely getting to 50 billion soon. So this data gives us a lot of information, because this will help us to actually analyze the things that we'll be looking at. So in a moment, Magiel will guide you through the key observations, but to summarize them on a high level, first of all, we see that software quality is increasing, but we also see that the relevance of software has increased a lot. Of course, people have been starting to work from home and been relying on software more than ever before. That's something we also see looking at our software database. And so despite the pandemic, we see an uplift, but there's some key aspects to observe. Magiel will be showing you some of the details of how industry sectors and technology stacks, for instance, stack up. So Magiel, take it away and give us some details.
All right, thank you, Luc. Pleasure to present these results to you again, since we've been doing that for the last few years. Let's start with this slide here, showing you the overall summary of build quality as it progresses over time. So some notes to explain a bit what you're seeing here. On the left-hand side, you see the star rating that SIG uses to measure build quality, or maintainability, as we call it specifically. And that is a ranking that puts systems on the scale, comparing them to others. So we have calibrated that on a yearly basis, so that 3 stars represent the middle, let's say the market average build quality. Now this line here is slightly increasing year over year since about 2018, which indicates that actually this quality is slowly but steadily increasing. And I have to add here that what we're doing here is looking back through the lens, let's say, of the most recent maintainability model, the one of 2020, so that we can observe these differences. This is a very nice trend. Obviously, it means industry is getting better at producing build quality, even in this latest period since the start of the pandemic. So from 2020 March onwards, this trend appears to continue, meaning also that next year when, or actually this year when we calibrate our model again, we have to be a little bit more strict since the market average has moved up a little bit too. So there are some ways to look at this data, and we have been starting to show you some rankings since last year, and now we'll give you an update on that. So we slice the data basically by the industry sectors that our clients are in. Here you see already half of the ranking, starting from the sixth position downwards. So energy, oil, and gas, actually the leader in the last year, has dropped to place number 6. And the pack is closed by telecommunication sector, similar to last year. So if we look at number 5, we see government, very stable position there, similar to last year. Moving upwards, we get to financial services, then insurance business, banking, and then, of course, the number 1 this year being industrial transportation. So these are systems active in the business of railroads, ports, and that sort of high volume transport. These systems in that domain, in the sector of industrial transportation, have the highest adoption rate of modern technologies, and also even their legacy system being of quite high quality. So that's a very good position to be in for the future. Of course, at the bottom we have telecommunications, which are still suffering from quite a lot of old legacy systems that have quality issues that are hard to resolve and require a lot of focus. So hopefully that will improve in the next reports as we move on. Another way to look at these data is to slice it by the technology stacks that are being used. So these are basically combinations of programming languages and all kinds of supporting technologies. Here you see the ranking already from the 4th position and downwards. Microsoft is basically the stacks based on Microsoft, like C# and VB.NET and other languages. And obviously legacy closes the pack there with a combination of older programming languages. If you move upwards, we see modern scripting and mobile languages performing above market average. Then Java, JVM-based technologies, where a lot of activity is still going on and modernization is creating new languages and new technologies. And at the top, we have, similar to last year, low-code platforms with a tiny margin, slim margin over Java, JVM technologies. And in this category, we see quite a lot of activity with small systems being added, literally hundreds of them, that are still quite small. So the interesting thing will be to see in the future whether these technologies maintain their build quality advantage as they get bigger and older. Right. So looking at these data in this way, there are some questions that you could ask as an organization. So what do you want to do with these data? What can you take away? An obvious question is, of course, are you following this trend as well, right? So the software industry as a whole appears to be increasing in build quality. Are you doing the same? Are you leading? Are you holding, or are you lagging behind? So looking a bit more in detail could be like, are you getting away from your legacy technologies as effectively as you can? Or are you basically holding on to them and building new functionality also in those technologies? Are you, when you are looking to modern technologies, are you actually using their full build quality potential? Or is the code that you produce in newer technologies also below market average? And you could also ask the question, if I look to my industry sector, am I actually doing better than my peers, or am I doing worse? These are just some questions you could consider to put some perspective to these numbers in our report.
So with that said, we see that there is definitely improvements, which is a good thing. But we then ask ourselves the question, is this also the case when we specifically look at the last year? Because we've seen a very different way of working as compared to previously. Of course, working from home has been done by many people before, but maybe not to the extent that it was done in the last year. What was the impact? And so what we've done is looked, first of all, at the data, looked over time and very specifically into all the various metrics. But Magiel and the team has also extended a questionnaire globally across the industry to find the feelings of people, how they were producing their software and how they were feeling themselves in the meantime. So maybe, Magiel, you can guide us through your findings in that area.
Yeah, sure. Exactly, there are indeed two kinds of studies that we did. We wanted to approach these questions both quantitatively, so using numbers from our database, and also getting some qualitative data next to that. We'll talk first about some of the numbers. You see here two of the key metrics that we track typically also in our monitoring, but in this case we're talking about 300 systems in a group that we have tracked a year prior to the pandemic, so leading up to March 2019, and then also the same systems we track a year into the pandemic up until February 2020. So two metrics. First is on the left-hand side, coding. The amount of effort basically used by these teams to add and change code, expressed in person months, so the effort needed by a person to do that. On the right-hand side, we have the delta in maintainability. And in both cases, actually, there's some differences to observe. First, of course, the average in coding, the coding metric is quite different, right? So in the pandemic, there appears to be a rather lower number of coding efforts being produced, and on the other end, a little bit more quality, more maintainability. So these are the overall averages, and we'll dive a bit into what could be the reasons here in a bit. So this is a graph that shows the same coding metric, but then over time. So what we see here is for the system that we are tracking, the amount of coding expended was already decreasing a little bit before the pandemic. And then when we move inside the pandemic, it doesn't really recover. But there is later in the year 2020, there is a little bit of a bump there that seems to be an outlier. And after that, again, teams apparently don't produce as much code anymore as before. So we were a bit unsure how to interpret this. This is really because of the pandemic, and we're not really doing a causal analysis here. We're seeing some data before and during the pandemic. So here we really want to dive into some qualitative data to see if there could be something at hand here, which is why we started doing the survey. So we surveyed in collaboration with Leiden University, developers across the globe in an anonymous survey where we've asked them questions on three topics: actually their well-being, their fear of the pandemic, fear of COVID, and questions related to their day-to-day work, if they're supported well by their organizations, that sort of thing. One of the things we report on here, and we'll report a lot more details actually in the benchmark report, and also in a forthcoming academic publication that we're planning after this, is that developers, on the left-hand side, you see two plots where developers provide a rating for themselves on their job performance, which is what people typically put rather high. So you see here, people give themselves an 8 on average before the pandemic, and now they're a little bit less certain, and they come to a 7.5 with some more outliers, as you can see downward. So people are less confident in their own job. And not by a whole lot, but it's definitely visible. Another thing we're seeing in these survey results is that quite a lot more developers report that they are not able to work some of their time, which was 30% before the pandemic and now 60% during the pandemic. That could have a clear impact on their productivity, obviously. Further, they also say, hey, I can work with less concentration, which it could be because the home is also used by other people, and they're also less satisfied with the quality of their work. Thirdly, we've asked them in detail, are you supported well by your organizations, and what are the things you want and what are the things you receive? They're actually the top 5 things that they're asking for are not typically also being provided. So things like buying new equipment or paying for internet charges, or even handling childcare are not typically supports that developers get. However, they would still like to have them in order to support them better. Well, with that said, let's look a bit at the timelines that we are seeing for the quality ratings that we track. Here you see two metrics, actually, the overall maintainability that we've talked about before. So it's a bit of a bumpy ride in general, but it seems even more so during the pandemic, when we're actually now looking at the final months, hopefully, of this pandemic period, actually seeing quite a decline happening in maintainability. So the top graph, while on the bottom, another metric, which is a sub-metric actually, where we look at architectural quality, we see that overall this has been maintained quite well by developers, but can still actually be trending down at the moment. So something to keep in mind. So what questions should be on top of your mind, basically looking into these things happening during pandemic? One thing obviously is that as work is more distributed, how are you sure that you maintain quality? What methods do you have in place? How is code review, peer review, pair programming, and those things, how are they functioning? Are you measuring a code quality? Are developers well supported enough? Are you in control of the well-being and their job-related confidence? What are you doing to keep that high? And of course, also, it may seem trivial, but there's a more stronger dependence on digital systems. Now that everything is basically, even on the basic level of working together, is handled by systems. Some things to keep in mind, I think. Well, to wrap this up, we promised the respondents of our survey that we would donate a sum of 500 euros to an open source project. And our respondents could provide an open source project of their choice. The winner of this little contest is Wikipedia. There were many suggestions, many diverse suggestions, but Wikipedia is a clear winner, and we'll donate these 500 euros to the Wikimedia Foundation as soon as possible. Luc, back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Magiel. If you summarize, our first part said overall build quality is improving. So that's a good thing. We saw industries moving up. We saw technology stacks competing. But in the second part, we also saw that looking at the details, not everything is perfect. Productivity went down, and we also saw that there's a rather clear decline in the last couple of months in build quality. This could be an indication of more. Obviously, we'll keep track of this moving forward. So that overall trend in the last 10 years of build quality continuously increasing, we could be at a tipping point now. This could be the result of working from home more, all the things that we see there not going so well. So this is definitely something to be aware of. It's definitely something we will be looking at moving forward. Because as this is being done, we actually are building technical debt, as we know. And this technical debt is something that we need to get rid of. But the question is, do we need to get rid of everything? Do we need to get rid of which parts? That's a continuous debate. But there's some great models that we have used for this. And Magiel and the team have worked on analyzing this in further depth. So I think it's good to have a little bit more content on this and use our vast database to get some more insights on that. Magiel.
Yeah, so technical debt is quite an old metaphor already in software engineering. Typically, it points to the quality-related problems in a system, in a software system. This is also the definition that we use. But with just the definition, you're not there yet. You need to quantify it in order to make it tangible and to be able to do something about it. So what we are looking at is sort of the cost related to repairing all these quality deficiencies as a way to quantify the debt. So on the right-hand side, you see a little visualization of what happens if you don't do that. Basically, you pay interest. So not literally, but the interest is paid in extra work that you people have to do to keep a system operational. So somewhere down there is an optimal maintenance effort but in a bad situation, you could be paying a multitude in interest on top of that. So we've provided some earlier publications actually on this topic. Very recently in November 2020, we had a webinar, and earlier we had an academic paper talking about the way we quantify these things. So please look them up if you want to know more details on that. For this benchmark report, we have done a little investigation in basically the question that Luc was asking. So what systems should you actually consider for technical debt, for renovation, for that purpose, for the removal of technical debt? So there are some simplifications happening here, because we're looking at about 2,500 systems that we've measured in the last 3 years. And we've asked the question, okay, so for which one of those is it actually viable? Is there a positive business case to renovate that to a 4-star quality level, which is what we recommend if you start from scratch, basically with the software system. So for now, we've used that quality level. It may not be optimal for every system, but that is, for this investigation, this is the target. So then we have a return on investment calculation here. Basically, you reduce maintenance effort because you've improved the quality of the system. But that improvement, of course, costs you some effort and some money as well. So there is this ROI calculation you can do. And if it doesn't get above 100% in, let's say, 5 years, which is the horizon we've used here, then it's not viable to do it. And it doesn't pay off by itself, not through the maintenance cost reduction, at least. There may be other reasons to renovate. Sometimes you have to switch platform, or there may be other reasons, but not just by reducing maintenance can you get a positive business case. So if you're on the right-hand side here of the dotted line, then you're good for renovation. And otherwise, maybe you should not do it at this time, or you should focus on a different quality level. So we decided to take that a step further to see how bad this problem of maintenance actually can be. And you see here 3 scenarios for this 5-year period. So you could maintain the bulk of systems as is, not improving their quality. You could renovate them all, just get everything to 4-star quality level, or you could renovate only those high ROI systems. And here you see that the difference can be quite big. Also in absolutes, because we're looking at 2,500 systems here, the numbers here are indeed in the billions. So if you would maintain this bulk of systems, it would cost you in this 5-year period almost 4 billion euros expended as effort. If you would renovate them all, you pay quite a big sum to do the renovation. You pay some lesser maintenance costs, but it overall would still be more costly. It would get you 4.3 billion euros cost for this period. However, if you focus only on the renovation of high ROI systems, maybe you get lower costs at about 3.5 billion. The trick, of course, is finding out which are the high ROI systems. So for that, we use historical data on each system to figure out how much are they actually changed in practice. Some things, of course, that can still be tuned. How much maintenance are you expecting? And there's quite some customization possible to fine-tune these models. So we're implementing many of such features currently into our SIG platform, of which you see a mock-up here on the right, where we're showing some visualization capabilities of technical debt that could exist in your portfolio, so that everybody can, all stakeholders can basically see where things are. We're looking into ways to prioritize opportunities for refactoring based on both the ROI and the risk involved with such refactorings. Changing software is always a risky thing. We're looking into ways to do that on a more fine-grained level than the system level that we just talked about. And finally, we're looking into ways that this is in research currently to calculate a cost-optimal quality level for a given operational lifetime, so that you know that you per system can choose where you want to go and how much effort you want to spend in renovation. Well, I hope we've provided some of the answers to your questions, Luc.
Yeah. So I think that was a great subject. There's obviously a lot more to be said about technical debt. And as Magiel said, this was a simplification. They're trying to lift everything to 4 stars. But in reality, you would be looking at, if you have a 2.5 star system, maybe it's optimal to lift it to 3.2. We can help you determine that optimal level. But let me try to summarize what we've spoken about today. All of that is nicely summarized in this wonderful benchmark report that you will all be getting in a lot more detail with some more substantiation of the numbers. But overall, I think it's fair to say that build quality has increased overall. We see a global trend of improving build quality, but there are some nuances there, especially because of the COVID analysis that Magiel has shown you. You can see that the recent months show a decline, and they have also shown a decline in productivity. So there are clear indications that we need to be on top of this, because this could be the tipping point of where quality starts to decrease for very obvious reasons. So for managers out there, please be aware of the needs of your development teams, because there might be a direct connection between their well-being, I guess there is, their well-being, the productivity, as well as the build quality. So that is an important thing. The technical debt discussion, you've seen the numbers, and you obviously are not running maybe 2,500 systems, but you are running probably dozens or even hundreds of them. So it very easily gets into very high numbers of IT cost. So be very aware of how you spend this and really figure out what is the optimal level of technical debt you can afford yourself for a given system. With that said, I'd like to open up for questions. Let me see if there's questions coming in, and there are. So, are systems in the industrial transport sector that we're obviously leading often using low code? That's one of the questions coming in.
Yes, that is a good question, of course, since we've also shown low code technologies in general getting the highest rating, although the differences are small in the top ranks. In industrial transportation, there's the widest adoption. If you look at the number of systems that are produced in low code, so that is one thing. If I remember correctly, though, the amount of code related to that is not the highest. So in that sector, also other technologies like Java and even their legacy systems tend to be of higher quality than in other sectors.
Okay.
So it's not just the low code.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, okay. Is it possible, I just said it is possible to determine a cost optimal quality level, given the systems, maybe how it looks, what the operational outlook and what the maintenance requirements are. Could you maybe share a few thoughts on that, how that would be done?
Yes, so it's a very obvious thing to want. And we've typically been recommending to look to a 4-star level if you start from scratch. However, in many situations, you have a system and you need to take it forward. So you need to come up with some other alternative. If it is very far away from 4 stars, it may not be economically viable to get there. So what we're looking into now, we're researching ways to basically predict the level of maintenance that a system will need. For example, based on historical change. You could also involve some other predictions that humans provide, like this system will, it will be phased out, or it will need a new UI, or it will need some other thing. Everything together with its current maintainability level, its current architecture, we can involve to come up with some kind of prediction that gives you, basically can calculate an optimal quality rating for you for the future.
Yeah. Okay. Now, with that said, I think we're done in our session. I'd like to hand over to our next speaker. Thank you for your attention and look forward to receiving this wonderful benchmark report.